Seeing that we have a quorum, I'd like to call to order this regular session of the Bloomington Common Council for Wednesday, June 5th, 2024. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Flaherty.
Here.
Zulik.
Here.
Rallo.
Here.
Ruff.
Here.
Piedmont Smith.
Here.
Stossberg.
Here.
Asari.
Here.
Rosenbarger.
Here.
And Daly.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to our land and labor acknowledgement. We recognize that the city of Bloomington sits on native land. The city, as well as city administrative buildings, are on the traditional homelands of the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, and Shawnee people, and we acknowledge they are past, present, and future caretakers of this land. We also acknowledge that much of the economic progress and development in Indiana, and specifically Bloomington, resulted from the unpaid labor and forced servitude of people of color, specifically enslaved African labor. We acknowledge that this land remains home to and a site of gathering and healing for many indigenous and other people of color, and commit to the work necessary to create and promote a more just and equitable Bloomington. We move forward knowing and acknowledging our rich, complicated, and sometimes painful past so that we can learn from it and create a true land of opportunity. On tonight's agenda, we have reports from council members, including a proposed letter to the Monroe County Capital Improvement Board regarding the Convention Center project. Then we will move on to reports from the mayor and city offices, where we have two reports. A report from the city controller about the opioid settlement distribution funds, or opioid settlement funds distribution, I guess is more appropriate. And then a status report on duplexes and triplexes from the Planning and Transportation Department. Then we will move to reports from council committees, if there are any, and then to the first opportunity for members of the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda. We next will move to appointments to boards and commissions, and we do have a few, I think, tonight. Then we will move on to legislation for second readings and resolutions, where we have Resolution 2024-11 to amend the City of Bloomington's comprehensive plan in order to incorporate one new goal and three new policies related to accessible transportation and mobility principles. Then we have Resolution 2024-12, Resolution on Budgeting Excellence and Strategic Transformation. And then we have Ordinance 2024-13, to amend Title II of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Administration and Personnel in regard to amending BMC 2.04.380, Order of Business at Regular Sessions. And along with that, if that one ordinance is adopted, then we will consider adoption of a revised document called Rules for Making Public Comment. Then we move to legislation for first readings, where we have Ordinance 2024-14 to amend Title VII of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Animals, specifically amending Chapter 7.16, Commercial Animal Establishment Permits, Chapter 7.54, Fees, and Chapter 7.56, Enforcement Procedure. Then we will move to our second period of public comment on items that are not on the agenda. We will address some items of council scheduling, and then we will adjourn. All right, so we will start with council member reports. And I think let's start with the letter to the CIB, if somebody would like to bring that forward. Councilmember Flaherty.
I'd like to move that the council authorize distribution of a letter to the Monroe County Capital Improvement Board regarding input into the Convention Center expansion project.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Councilmember Flaherty, would you like to just briefly summarize the letter? And for the benefit of the public, there were a few corrections, or I guess one substantive change and a few minor corrections that went out in a packet this afternoon. I apologize that there was not much notice, So, Mr. Flaherty, if you would like to just kind of summarize, maybe give the general categories of the letter and how it came about?
Sure. So this letter was born of, I think, our meetings earlier this year, through which we approved the Capital Improvement Board's annual budget for 2024. During that process, I think there was fairly general alignment among council members voiced at that meeting that we needed some additional structure and a way to provide input beyond, say, public comment meetings or public comment at the CIB's meetings to give clarity and guidance prior to the CIB coming back to us for formal approval of a bond issuance to support the project expansion. We recognized sort of the lack of stage gates in the process and noting some of the open questions, during the approval of the budget. I think there was a desire to, again, kind of have increased clarity and alignment to help the CIB in its day-to-day work of advancing the project's design and budgeting prior to bonding. So that's why this letter was created. We've had 2 work sessions to solicit input from council members to understand what issues were important to folks. Councilmember Zulik, Rosenberger, and myself then got together and drafted a first draft of a letter. And we had also invited input, not just in the first work session, but via email from folks. We then had a second work session where we discussed the draft letter that we had developed, also took input from county elected officials and the mayor. And that then led to some minor revisions in light of the feedback from folks, which President Piedmont Smith and myself worked on this weekend. And then, as President Piedmont Smith noted, there was one more small, some small non-substantive changes in the addendum that went out this evening, and one substantive change in the parking section that I would actually say returned more closely to alignment with the original draft letter. I'm happy to get into the details of that if folks want. It's paragraph 19. But yeah, the letter covers broadly finances and approvals that will be needed for the project across a few different categories, as well as design and use within the project. I would say with the overarching goal of aligning with city policy and values as the council understands them. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions about the letter? Councilmember Rosenberger.
Thank you. I would like to take you up on that offer to give more detail about paragraph 19, the parking.
Sure. So there had been a section in the initial draft letter about a desire not to subsidize structured parking through the use of food and beverage tax revenues or public funds. It gets to be a bit of a complicated question because there were other components of that, like a desire to direct some parking into the 4th Street garage, which is likely to be adjacent to the convention center expansion, as well as calls for consideration that the private hotel might wish to add structured parking. And so I know that this was discussed at the second work session about the total numbers of parking needed, whether it'll be surface parking or structured parking. It gets a little bit tricky to specify details of this because it's a system that's interacting with other units. And so the draft that went out in the packet on Friday spoke to pricing, and that pricing probably should be similar to the 4th Street garage. But I think thanks to Councilmembers Piedmont Smith and Stossberg, who got back in touch with me about it, I think that shift actually missed the mark. But the broader point is that to the extent possible, user fees should be covering the costs. The pricing is a little bit immaterial. It could be built into the cost of a convention, for instance, in booking that, or it could be approached in other ways. So that's what the paragraph 19 updated in the second packet addendum that went out at this afternoon contains.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Oh, Councilmember Stossberg.
Thank you. I'll just ask a curiosity question. I'm just trying to get back to the right paragraph. It talks about in paragraph 5, the 10% contingency for buffering. Is 10% kind of a standard contingency? Is that why that number was chosen?
Yes, as I understand it, that's a fairly standard
Okay, thanks.
amount.
Okay, any other questions? If not, we'll go to the public. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on the draft letter to the CIB? Come up and state your name. If you're online, you can raise your hand via Zoom, and you'll have up to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Council. This is Christopher Rimji from the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. We've been a strong advocate for expanding the convention center for multiple years. We appreciated the 2 working sessions that we witnessed, having that interaction and bringing in your county colleagues. I thought went a long way. We've been pleased with the progress with the CIB. Our members have the utmost confidence in that entity to move the project forward in a timely manner without the political wranglings that has marred this community in recent past. The chamber thinks that the council and the other entities should be a strong partner in it, especially one with the fiscal responsibility. And this memo encapsulates many of the city's values, and I think that is a great way to show what we need to have in this project. In the same respect, we don't want to add layers of that would cause delay or anything that compromises this in the long run. There's a finite of funds that we have for this, and adding or siphoning them off only diminishes the project. I want to refer a little bit to Jeff McKim's comments at the Monroe County Council on May 28th. A lot of that encapsulates some of the points, but I want to amplify one of them that I was confused on, which was number 8 under project approvals, and bringing the Planning Commission involved in this, and why that is and when it is, because that does cause certain delays, and time is money. When the council agreed to the $3 million for general fund CREED money to be used for the Forge Technology Center, was that required to use the Planning Commission? When the council bonded for the West Showers building, was that needed the Plan Commission? I'm just not sure when the Plan Commission has to be involved or invoked. That's just a sort of a point of clarification. The other thing is a little bit on the teen and senior space. While I think it's noble, per sort of County Council Member Munson's comment at the joint meeting, I'm not sure on the fit on that. I want to evoke Democratic Chair and Council at Large candidate David Henry's phrase, "We want a 12-month economy," when he spoke about this city-county venture. The project can't be looked at as a singular building. It's a driver to bring visitors into town we are very much proud of. The impact comes from a thriving downtown and increased tax base. We saw 7 such public comments from restaurant and shop owners here just several weeks ago supporting the project. Example of where that tourism dollar's at work was yesterday in the Indiana Business Insider. In 2017, Carmel did the Kris Kringle Market. Just last year, there was 475,000 visitors who produced a direct impact of $23 million. That's for every dollar spent in that market, an additional $1.53 was spent and generated within the county. Just something to keep in mind when we talk about this and the goal of this project. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else care to comment on the letter? Mr. Lucas, is there anybody online?
No hands raised.
Before we vote on the motion. Councilmember Ruff.
I'd just like to thank Councilmember Flaherty, Councilmember Rosenbarger, Councilmember Piedmont Smith, and any council members that invested a lot of time and thought and collaboration and hard work into this effort to clarify some priorities and goals of the community regarding this project through the council, through our job as representatives. So I just want to thank and acknowledge them.
Any other comments?
Zulik, too.
Yes, I was going to add, Councilmember Zulik also participated.
I just want to re-emphasize for the public that these are not like our demands. We, changed wording very specifically to make it clear that these are our requests and that we understand that we are one of 4 bodies who are investing in this project and one of 5 bodies, including the CIB, who are actually kind of dictating the terms under which the convention center is being built. So I am going to vote for this letter, but I just want to be very, very clear about that. I was at the CIB meeting very recently where we they interviewed all of the different construction managers. I think that the CIB has the convention center in good hands, and so I look forward to continuing to learn from them. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Daley?
And I just want to also add, thank you very much to the council members who helped with the letter and helping to adjust the tone, because I know that there was some concern about that, and just making it more like what Sydney just, or Councilmember Zulik, I apologize, just clarified. So thank you all very much for that.
All right. If there are no further comments, Clerk Bolden, could you please call the roll on the motion to approve this letter?
Councilmember Flaherty?
Yes.
Zulik?
Yes.
Rallo?
Yes.
Ruff?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Stossberg?
Yes.
Asari?
Yes.
Rosenbarger?
Yes.
And Daley?
Yes.
Thank you.
That motion passes, and so we've approved the letter. We will get that to the CIB as soon as possible. And seeing that we took some time here, about 10 minutes of the council comment period, I would, if there are no objections, I would like to extend the council comment period by 10 minutes to, that would be to 7:06. 7:04? 7:04. Thank you, Parliamentarian Stossberg. Next, I'd like to offer Councilmember Rallo an opportunity to speak to an item that we voted on at our last meeting. Councilmember
thank
Rallo.
you. I appreciate that. I've already submitted my comments to the clerk's office, and those will be included in the minutes.
So you did not wish to give any report out loud?
No, as long as they appear in the minutes, I think we can proceed.
Okay.
But thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Well, then let's see if other council members have a report this evening. Councilmember Daley?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Sorry, you always catch me off guard if you go the opposite way. I just want to start a couple quick things. I want to start wishing everybody a very happy Pride Month. So happy June and happy Pride. I also want to say, for anybody who's known me at all, you know that I have been a gun violence prevention advocate for the past decade. And this Friday is National Gun Violence Awareness Day. We observe what we call Wear Orange, the first weekend in every June, to bring awareness to the gun violence crisis, which takes more than 120 American lives every single day and wounds and traumatizes more than twice as many. So we call this weekend Wear Orange because in January of 2013, a 15-year-old named Hadia Pendleton was shot and killed in Chicago 2 weeks after marching in President Obama's second inaugural parade. And so in an effort to honor her and to raise awareness to the fact that this is an epidemic in our country, her friends decided to start wearing orange to honor her life. They chose orange because that is the color that hunters wear, to say, please don't shoot me, my life is precious. And so for the past 10 years, Wear Orange has been a national movement where we encourage everybody to wear orange on that weekend, and we light up national monuments. For the past several years, the Monroe County Courthouse lights up in orange. If you've ever noticed it, that's why, because it's for Gun Violence Awareness Day. I'd like to share some very startling facts about gun violence right here in Indiana, which will highlight why everybody should care. Approximately 1,111 Hoosiers die every year from gun violence. So this breaks down to roughly 3 people every single day in Indiana. And gun violence includes gun suicides, which actually comprise about 57% of gun deaths right here in Indiana. Indiana has the 19th highest rate of gun deaths in the country. And this rate has increased by 34% over the past decade in our state. So gun suicides have gone up by 22%, and gun homicides have gone up by 51% in the past 10 years. Gun violence costs the state of Indiana $13.2 billion every year. And so you can find all of these statistics and many, many more fascinating statistics broken down by state, across the country on a website called everystat.org. So I'm telling you all of this because I hope that you will join our 10th Wear Orange observation this Friday, hosted by Moms Demand Action. It is, like I said, this Friday, June 7th, at 8 p.m. outside the courthouse. We'll be gathering on the lawn to send the message that we can end gun violence. And don't forget to wear orange on Friday. Even if you can't make it to the event, please put on an orange shirt. I know it's an incredibly popular color, and I know you all have lots of orange in your wardrobe. But this is an easy way to spread our message of hope and resolve. And you get bonus points if you post your orange pics on social media. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rosenbarger.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I wanted to just piggyback on what Councilmember Daley just said. I know in Indiana it's just so incredibly hard to do anything legally to ban guns from our establishments. I think one really cool thing to do would be to work with the Bloomington Chamber of Commerce to either greatly encourage or require that members of the chamber post signs that guns aren't allowed in those establishments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Osare.
No updates.
Councilmember Stossberg.
Hi, thank you. I also wanted to say Happy Pride Month. So happy Pride Month, y'all. And just a couple of schedule notes for me. My constituent meeting is Saturday, June 15th, which is not this Saturday, but it's next Saturday. And because the 1st was a Saturday, it feels like it's coming very quickly. So that is at 11 o'clock here in City Hall on the 15th, if anybody wants to come and say hello. And also, next week on Monday night is Plan Commission, and on Tuesday night there's a council budget advance meeting. So if anybody's interested in any of those things, I would encourage you to tune in. Thank you.
Thank you. And on my right, Councilmember Flaherty.
No report this evening, thank you.
Councilmember Zulik.
Well, I was going to start with Happy Pride Month. I guess I will just remind us all that the first Pride Month was a riot, and to thank the Black trans women of color who have got us to today. They are, specifically, I'd like to shout out Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Rallo.
Thanks. I'm going to take the global view tonight. I'm old enough to have lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis, believe it or not. I was just over a year old, but I remember my family speaking with me about it later on as a teenager. And it was a very serious time because it was very close to global nuclear war. Looking back, we can acknowledge that we owe our existence to the carefully considered and cautious negotiations that brought us back from the abyss. We've learned much over the years about that resolution. A blockade instead of outright aggression, of an invasion saved the world from annihilation. JFK and his brother, Attorney General RFK, resisted an invasion that was favored by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. No one knew that the missiles were operational in Cuba, and they would have been launched by colonels had we invaded. An agreement was reached and the blockade ended. But a Soviet sub lost communication with Moscow. Fearing the worst, the captain proceeded to launch an attack on the American fleet. It would have happened had it not been for the first officer, Vasily Arkhipov, who countermanded the launch. We only knew much later that this officer, a single individual, could well have saved the world from global thermonuclear war. There have been other close calls coming down to decisions made by a single person. Then the Cold War ended, a reprieve, a peace dividend, but it did not last. Today, we in the West are toe-to-toe with Russia in a proxy war in Ukraine. Neither side is talking with each other. Now that looks to change, instead escalating into direct hot war between NATO and Russia. The doomsday clock of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists is the closest it's been to midnight, 90 seconds. Between the West and Russia, They possess 11,000 nuclear weapons. The balance of terror, appropriately called MAD, mutually assured destruction, still exists, with the additional calculus of, quote, lose them or lose them. That is, there is an incentive to launch first if you feel that war is inevitable. Watching the escalation daily, I fear that we are on some kind of conveyor belt. We've been sending long-range missiles to Ukraine, giving the go-ahead to strike within Russia. We've been sending nuclear-capable F-16s. Been placing missiles in Sweden. Been talking about NATO boots on the ground. And then last week, May 22nd, an alarming incident. Drone attacks on 2 Russian radar installations needed to detect incoming ICBMs. This could well have been interpreted as a prelude to a nuclear first strike. This is what the Russians, need for their defense, and it effectively blinded them. So my statement tonight is to acknowledge that the threat of nuclear war is still very real. It is escalating, that mistakes and miscalculations could result in the unthinkable, but also that negotiations and diplomacy remain an avenue to de-escalate. All that's needed is the will to do so. And this is where individuals can still make a difference. I've been contacting my representatives in the White House, and I urge citizens to do the same, to de-escalate, open up diplomacy, and negotiate an end to the escalation. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Ruff?
No report tonight. I'd rather just spend a second dwelling on the sobering comments of our colleague, Councilman Rallo.
All right, and I will just mention that I have my constituent meeting this Saturday at 11 a.m. It is via Zoom, and the link is available on the City Council website, which is at bloomington.in.gov/council. All right, let's move on to reports from the mayor and city offices, and we will start with a report from Controller Jessica McClellan about the opioid settlement funds. Welcome.
Good evening, Council. And yes, I am here to give you a report on the opioid settlement funds that we've received so far and what we've budgeted to use them for. So municipalities in Monroe County are receiving distributions from the state about, it has not been very consistent. It seems like it's about once or twice a year from the settlement from the opioid companies that were sued for their effects on the entire people, all the people in the United States. And so what we have received so far is shown here. So what we receive is broken into 2 different pots called unrestricted share and then the abatement share or the restricted share. So in 2022, 23, and so far in 24, we've received a total of $179,000 in the unrestricted share, and we've received a total of $724,000 in the restricted or abatement share. So over the course of the ensuing years until 2038, we should receive a total of $2.6 million in the abatement share and $975,000 in the unrestricted share. I have not seen any distributions yet from the attorney's fee portion. I keep checking the Attorney General's memos and press releases on information about that, so I can update everybody about that. So as you can see, the distributions each year are listed on the far right, and it's going to be about $250,000 to $260,000 after 2025 for several years, and then it drops back down to about $158,000 and then a little bit more there at the end. This is something that we will bring to you to budget every year. And in my next slide, I have here what was budgeted for this year in this fund. So in the restricted fund, opioid settlement restricted, that has to be used for approved abatement uses. And the city decided to help fund a building and a vehicle for the Indiana Recovery Alliance, which is a partnership with Monroe County to provide matching funds for a Family Social Services Agency grant. And so that's what the $100,000 is. And then the city also decided to help fund a mobile crisis unit for Stride. And that says year 1 of 3. And so that is all that has been budgeted in the opioid settlement funds. We don't have anything budgeted in unrestricted, and this is all that we have budgeted in restricted. I also just want to mention that the Stride unit is also budgeted to be funded in the amount of $25,000 from the ED Lit Fund. So you also have that in your budget. So that's in the CFRD budget. And so I just wanted to let you know exactly what the Attorney General's office says is that opioid restricted fund is controlled by the settlement agreement and must be spent on approved remediation uses. And that's a large document on the Attorney General's website that really spells out exactly what all the options are for remediation. Opioid unrestricted can be spent in any way that the general fund can be spent. It is unrestricted. I'd like to open it up for questions for me, if you have any. It can be questions that I could possibly answer now, but definitely ask me things that you want me to research and get back to you on.
Thank you, Controller McClellan. Are there questions? Councilmember Asari.
Thank you so much. How does our opioid settlement compare to what the county is getting, and how is that determined?
It is not the same as what the county is getting. The full breakdown of every unit is a great big giant spreadsheet provided by the state, and I can give you that to all of you, and I can provide a little summary of how what the differences are. I can highlight those areas to show you exactly what the other units in our area are getting.
Just a very brief follow-up is, what's the time period that the settlement money is released over?
Until 2038.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
And then you asked about how it's how it's being distributed, what it's based on. I'll find that out too.
Councilmember Stossberg?
Just a quick question for clarity. So is this $150,000 from budget year 2024? So that's out of the total that we've gotten in 2022, 23, and 24. Were there other expenditures from this settlement in 2022 or 2023?
There were about $30,000 of expenditures in 23 to extra downtown outreach grants. Most of the downtown outreach grants came out of the parking meter fund, and then they had more need, and they moved some of they spent their $250,000 for the downtown outreach grant last year, and then they awarded additional grant money to those same types of harm reduction agencies in the amount of like $30,000 last year.
Okay, but so I'm not even going to try to do that quick math except to say it sounds like that means that we have a fair amount of opioid settlement dollars that could be utilized in the coming years.
That's correct.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Rallo?
Thank you. I'm interested in outcomes. As the council has indicated, we like outcomes these days, and that's very, I think, virtuous to do that. So we know opioids are extremely addictive, and so at the end of the day, will we know how many people have broken free of addiction, and will a report be rendered to give us that information, that data?
There are so many agencies working on the problem, and I think that the city needs to decide what it wants its outcomes to be, what it wants its measure of outcome to be. Obviously, we want to see the final outcome being people broken free from this addiction and back on the track towards health and wealth. But I understand that. I think that we need to really have a conversation about how we measure those outcomes, because I expect it's going to be very difficult.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but it's a very good question, and I understand where you're going with this. Like, if we are going to budget for outcomes,
Yeah.
we need to talk about those.
So, essentially, the outcomes are yet to be decided, and this discussion will include the council and the administration, and we'll
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
set some measure.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Yeah, I look forward to hearing everybody's ideas about how to budget this.
Other questions for the controller? I had one, but now it went out of my head, so I'll have to send it along. Any responses to these questions, if you could send to the whole council or to Mr. Lucas, who can pass it along. We'd appreciate that.
Well, thank you for, oh, yeah.
I remember my question. Okay, so moving forward, are there plans for additional appropriations of these funds?
To be honest, not that I know of, but I am always willing to bring additional appropriations to you if there is something that you and the administration want to accomplish and it means an additional appropriation. We can definitely make that happen.
And are there any plans to work together with the county to leverage both sets of funds to work on projects?
I can't speak exactly to leveraging both sets of funds, but I really shouldn't speak for the mayor, because I have honestly not been involved in those conversations. I just know that the general, overall understanding of how to succeed with the outcomes that we want to see is to do it with a partnership with the county and others in Bloomington. But that's as much detail as I know. As I know that they are working on partnerships. I just don't know exactly what those are.
Okay. All right. Well, any additional information you can find, we look forward to receiving it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Next, we have Jacqueline Scanlon from the Department of Planning and Transportation to give us an update on duplexes and triplexes. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Jackie Scanlon, Development Services Manager, Planning and Transportation Department. This is our biannual report related to plexes and ADUs. So just by way of reminder, Council approved a change to the UDO related to duplexes and triplexes in 2021, and the ordinance contained the following language. The Planning and Transportation Department will track requests and approvals for the uses amended in this ordinance and report those findings to the Plan Commission Administration and Common Council every 6 months from the effective date. So the ordinance made duplexes conditional in the R1, R2, and R3, and triplexes conditional in R4. It also required that conditional use approvals related to the uses in the R1, R2, and R3 must include a neighborhood meeting and be seen by Board of Zoning Appeals as opposed to the hearing officer. And council placed a 150-foot buffer around newly approved duplex dwellings, around which new approvals cannot be sought for 2 years. And council also placed a cap of 15 per year on the use of those districts. So it, again, was signed into law in July of 21, so it's been almost 3 years. We have had 6 duplex approvals total. So since our report in October of 2023, we've had 11 additional inquiries about possible duplexes in the R1, R2, or R3. Again, as we've reported in other meetings, they range from basic questions about whether or not one is allowed, to process questions, to proceeding with filings. 2 dwelling duplexes in the total of 6 were approved in November of '23, so since the last time we were here. One was for a new duplex building, and one was for an addition to an existing structure. And the report indicates that the department currently has 1 conditional use request filed and pending. However, we actually have 2. We just have another one that was, notice was sent to the paper today for. So 2 that are in process right now. We had 1 that was withdrawn last year and 1 that almost got to filing and could not file because of the notice of violation regulation in the use-specific standards. And that has stopped at least 1 or 2 others as well, some we've reported on here. Let's see, last time we reported, I believe, 35 ADUs, and we have had 3 additionally approved since that time. And of the 6 duplexes that have been approved, permits have been issued for 5 of them. I can answer any questions.
Okay, are there any questions for Ms. Scanlon? Councilmember Rallo.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. I'm curious about, do you happen to have data on whether the homes that were plexed were owner-occupied and then converted to rental, or whether they were rental homes that were then plexed?
Sure, I don't on me, but we could get that for you. So
Okay.
basically, I can tell you just of the 6, I can think of at least 1 where it's owner-occupied. And they wanted to expand one of the units, so they had to legitimize the duplex so that they could do the expansion. And we had, I think, 2 that were new build. So we can let you know what those properties were before the approval.
Okay, I mean, there are very few, so it's hardly
Yep.
a trend, but, so there is another possibility, and that is that the owner has remained in the house, plexed it, and rented that.
Yes.
And that would be helpful too,
Yep.
to find out if they're still living there and, right, they've got a rental. Thank you.
Councilmember Flaherty?
Thank you. Have we had any of those 6, did staff recommend approval to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the Board of Zoning Appeals had different findings and denied the petition? Has that happened?
No, so the 6, so we are reporting on approvals. So, but we haven't taken any, sorry, yeah, not one of the 6, but we don't have others as well. We haven't taken any forward that have been denied. The requirements are pretty stringent right now, so, and I think that is also reflected in the fact that 5 out of the 6 have already pulled permits. People aren't just going forward to get the approval and sitting on it. Like, the ones we've seen actually go forward are very serious about building them, and so making sure that they can meet the requirements before they go to Board of Zoning Appeals is what we've seen thus far.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Stossberg?
In terms of the Board of Zoning Appeals and going through this process, how much leeway does the Board of Zoning Appeals have to, say, deny a duplex? Like, if staff has said, yes, they meet all of the requirements, can the Board of Zoning Appeals say, sorry, I think that we disagree, and just say no?
Sure, so such a good question. The approval process is conditional use, so there are, for duplexes in particular, they have use-specific standards that they have to meet. So for example, if we indicate one of them is potentially subjective, it's related to whether or not the architectural details of the building are similar to those along the same block face. If, for example, if the Board of Zoning Appeals didn't agree with us on that, they could write their own finding related to that and deny it. And so they have use-specific standards, and then they have to, they have findings of fact, general ones related to conditional use, and some of those as well kind of are a little broader, related to character of the area, that type of thing. So if the Board of Zoning Appeals felt that the findings that we had proposed to them as draft findings were inaccurate related to the petition, they could rewrite them and deny it. They would have to be able to say, point to what they think doesn't meet in the code.
But generally speaking, that's about the look of the structure.
The use-specific standard one is, yes, but then The findings for conditional uses are slightly more general. So some of them, for example, are like in line with the UDO, in line with the comprehensive plan, but there are some related to like characteristics of the area. So if they, negative impacts on the neighborhood. So if we felt that it was appropriate and they felt that it wasn't, they could write their own finding and deny it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Thank you for the report. I remember during one of the reports, I asked if we could also get a report out on single-family homes that have been, plexes that have been converted to single-family homes. Do you have any of those numbers?
I don't have that data, but we can put something together for you. We don't, as we don't see much of these, we don't see a lot of those, but we do see them. So we can let you know that for the same time frame.
Okay, it's good to be able to grieve that loss of affordable housing that people can just do without any kind of approval. Also, sometimes I call to ask about duplexes to beef up the numbers. That's not a question. And then 6 have been approved. Have you seen a plummet in housing prices? And if not, why not? Thank you.
Well, 6 have been approved. It's a much bigger town than 6, so they're not having a big effect on our housing price, right? But one of the things we said when we first originally proposed these was this: we don't think, and never tried to purport that this was the answer to affordable housing. It's just an option for people who might want to do something differently than what the majority of the people in town currently have available to them.
That makes so much sense. Thank you. It's just a tool in a very big toolbox. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for the ADU numbers. So we've had 38 approved, they don't need special approval, though.
Right, so when you first added them back into the code in around 2018, maybe 2017, they were conditional. So initially, just like the duplexes are now, so initially they needed approval, but then you took that off when we were reporting, what those kind of numbers were. As you know, people were similar with duplexes, worried about them at first. So yes, now they don't need a special board approval. So the numbers we're giving you are the actual permits issued. So we've issued actually 38 permits for someone to do an ADU on their property.
Okay. And so the 38 number is since 2017?
I believe it's either 2017 or 2018. Sorry, I'm blanking.
Could you check when
Yep.
the date is, the start date for that? Just be interested to see on average how many per year.
Sure.
Are there other questions for Ms. Canlon? Councilmember Rollo?
Thanks. This is related, but I wondered if you could give some insight. So affordability is related to, I agree with this, that has some relation to supply and demand. So we have houses off the market, and Airbnbs consist of some proportion of that. Do we have a number of Airbnbs in the community, and is there any potential for restrictions if this is a threat to home ownership?
Sure. I think there's a number floating around 500-ish in town. That's not something the department's verified, but I've definitely heard that in a number of places. They're not ideal, but as you may recall, the state has preempted most of the regulation we can do. So last year, we worked with Council Member Rosenbarger and staff Stephen Lucas, looking to see what those options could be. And basically, my recollection is, and one of them could probably tell you in more detail, that we can basically ask them to register and do a one-time registration fee, and that's about all we can do at this point. Had we done it when it was first initially proposed by the previous administration, that would be a different discussion, but we did not.
Great. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, actually, but
Yeah.
it's a good answer. I think I'm favorable to that. So at least we have the data.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, and that is our time for this portion of the meeting. Are there any other questions we can extend if there are? Seeing none. Thank you so much, Ms. Genlin. I appreciate that. And any responses, please send them to the council office. We will now go to, I believe, reports from council committees. I don't think we have any tonight. I don't see anybody jumping up. So we will now move to reports from the public. So this is an opportunity for public comments on items that are not on the agenda. We have, how many people here in chambers are wanting to speak? We have 3. Mr. Lucas, could you please make the announcement via Zoom to see how many we have there?
Yes, if there are folks joining us via Zoom that would like to speak, please let us know by raising your hand in Zoom. You can find the raise hand feature in your control bar by clicking on the Reactions tab or the More tab. You can also send a chat to the host to let us know you'd like to comment. I see one hand at the moment.
Okay, so that would be 4. So I would allow 5 minutes per commenter. I do want to mention that we did have some reports on our agenda. If you want to comment about the reports, that's fine. Since they're not legislative items, there would not be an opportunity otherwise to comment upon them. So if you're here in chambers, come on up and be sure to write down your name for the record. Okay, well then let's go with 3 minutes, 4 minutes. 4 minutes maximum. Thank you.
And I do wish to comment on the Plexus report that Ms. Scanlon presented. I appreciate that report. Just wanted to go over a little more slowly the various restrictions that were placed in place in the UDO in 2021. So the UDO made duplexes conditional in R1 through 3 and triplexes conditional in R4. Also required that the conditional use approvals related to R1 through R3 need to include a neighborhood meeting and be seen by the Board of Zoning Appeals. The council also placed a 150-foot buffer around newly approved duplex dwellings, around which new approvals cannot be sought for 2 years. And council also placed a cap of 15 units per year on the use in those districts. Based on the report presented this evening, since February 2022, the Planning and Transportation Department has had a total of 63 inquiries about possible duplex uses in the R1 through 3 zones. And as discussed, in that same period, there have been 6 approvals of duplexes based on conditional use review. I actually attended the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting on May 23rd when there was a conditional use hearing for a proposal for a duplex on a vacant lot in Bryan Park that was on the agenda. There were only 4 members of the Board of Zoning Appeals present at that point in the meeting, and there was a 2-2 tie on the approval of that duplex. There were some concerns. One BZA member took issue with the size of the building, so the total of the 2 units would be 2,400 square feet. There was also concern about the lack of affordability in new construction. I just wanted to note that that same developer could come and build a single-family home on that lot at 2,400 square feet, and there would be no conditional review use involved. So, not really clear on why that is a relevant concern, even though I realize there's desire for consistency in the neighborhood. And then affordability, I have to say that by extending, again, there's going to be another hearing June 20th. This will be back on the agenda for the BZA to revisit again, presumably with 5 members that may have a majority vote in that case. But extending the length of the review and with all the conditions I just described makes it harder to build more diversity of housing in our neighborhoods, especially infill in high-resource neighborhoods. The development of a duplex provides exactly the kind of housing that the UDO and the mixed urban residential goals that the City of Bloomington's comprehensive plan seeks to support. Bloomington's housing, as we all know, is increasingly too expensive for many people who would otherwise want to live in our community. We need to add to our housing supply with a diversity of housing options at a range of price points, such as duplexes that the UDO seeks to allow, particularly in Bryan Park, one of the city's high-resource, walkable neighborhoods close to transit, schools, jobs, recreational amenities. A duplex offers 2 households the chance to live in the neighborhood instead of only 1. So the questions I encourage council members to discuss, I appreciate the questions that many council members brought forward this evening. But when future reports come up, how many denials have there been? I was glad to hear that that seems not to have been an issue, but I think the report should include that, not just the approvals. Is the conditional review currently in place offering genuine guardrails, or is it imposing death by delay? So I will leave my comments there, and I appreciate your attention this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Zoom. Is there somebody on Zoom who would like to comment?
Yes, first up is Matt Gleason.
Okay, Mr. Gleason, go ahead and state your full name, and you'll have up to 4 minutes.
Hi, I'm Matt Gleason. Can you hear me well?
Yes, if you could speak up a little bit, that would be great.
All right. My name is Matt Gleason. I'd like to speak in favor of more affordable housing as well, especially giving all plex sizes the right to be built by right in those residential zones R1 through R4. It seems like all house types should have the same rights to be built as any other, including single family. And I think a lot of the restrictions and regulations are kind of enforcing things that the developers in the market would do naturally, but adding a lot more process to it and a lot more complication that is just slowing down affordable housing development. That's really all I have to say, but I'd like the council to consider changes on that. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll come back to Council Chambers for the next speaker here. Please be sure to sign in and state your name. You'll have up to 4 minutes.
Hi, my name is Greg Alexander. In 2021, the Traffic Commission passed a resolution asking the Director of Engineering to report to us about traffic fatalities. That's not quite what I aimed for. I wanted these reports to go to this council. Instead, I want to politicize it. My idea is that every time the decisions made in this building result in foreseeable bloodshed, someone with credentials should come here and tell you about it. So we received this report, which I'm going to summarize. This January, a hit-and-run driver killed a lady who had been walking along Walnut Street Pike. It was dark. It had been raining for several days. Next slide, please. As part of this investigation, the engineer took this photo, approximate location. The victim was probably walking on the opposite side from the pedestrian in this photo. Pedestrian activity is common on this road. In fact, there is a sidewalk here. You can't see it, and neither can that pedestrian. It's behind the trees. Since the sidewalk stops and starts and crosses the street, switches from one side to the other, it's important to be able to access it for you to be able to cross the street. But that's not convenient here, especially in January. That grass and tree plot is all mud. So next slide, please. This slide shows that the speed limit is posted at 30 miles an hour, but the average travel speed is 40. Nearly 300 drivers a day travel 50 on this narrow 2-lane road. In his oral remarks, the engineer reported that only 3% of drivers obeyed the speed limit, 97% speed, where pedestrians walk in the street every day. And golly gee, oh crap, I'm sorry, I messed up my speech. Next slide, please. The engineer identified some contributing factors. I highlight one of them. He cited the incomplete pedestrian network, which makes people walk in the street. And the fact that our investment in a straight, smooth road for cars had made people drive faster. And he identified some possible improvements. Next slide, please. That's that. And again, I've highlighted construct and maintain sidewalks. This is a certified engineer suggested this might make this kind of incident less likely in the future. And golly gee, wouldn't it be great to have some enforcement? At the commission, our police representative volunteered that he drives on Walnut Street Pike every day. He sees this. He sees the 97% of drivers speeding, and he does nothing. So here it is. We know that our ongoing investments make drivers go fast. We know that our ongoing neglect makes people walk in the streets. And so we run a lottery. Those of us who have to live in this system, we all buy tickets. And then some of us are chosen and we die. The licensed engineer pointed out that sidewalks could make this kind of incident less likely, but he hasn't got any budget for it. It's not just me, but I'm all you hear. No one else cares to say water is wet. Everyone knows you're killing us. I won't shut up about it. According to the police report, this victim was impoverished. For all I know, she doesn't matter, right? Does anyone matter if they're walking in Walnut Street Pike? Thank you.
Thank you. Next person here in council chambers.
Good evening again. Christopher Emsey from the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. Happy Pride Month. A lot to unpack so far this meeting. I'm going to echo Mr. Alexander's comments as a resident of Walnut Street Pike. It is everything he includes in that presentation, including being witness to a bicycle rider being run over and killed several years ago. I want to echo Madam President's statement on the opioid settlements and the need to collaborate with our county partners. They are enshrined to do the health in this county with the health department. I think that goes without saying. Council member updates, very heartfelt. I just want to especially say that Councilmember Rosenbarger, your statement is under consideration, has been passed to the President CEO of the Chamber, and we will get back to you. Last Thursday, the Bloomington Chamber of Commerce hosted our Showcase Bloomington Business Expo at Switchyard Park. Councilmember Zulik joined us for a very fun and enjoyable festivities. We were really happy with the community coming out and supporting our local businesses. The other thing I wanted to bring up today is sort of economic development and how that's kind of evolved in 30 years, where it's merely not just bringing in businesses for jobs. We realize that attracting and retaining employees is vital. And one of those things is a K-12 education system that's public and thriving. We are blessed to have two wonderful school districts in this county that we should never, ever take for granted. 25 years ago now, the Chamber had the foresight to start up its foundation wing, which delved into this and tried to enhance both of our school districts. That's called the Success School, which prepares local students to succeed and thrive in the future careers, providing real-world learning opportunities throughout the year. Our staff and countless volunteers were able to help excite and shape tomorrow's workforce for employers here in Monroe County. It also serves the Bloomington business community by offering meaningful volunteer opportunities for business professionals in our career learning programs, which provide workforce development services for youth. This past year, the Success School was able to host 33 events and programs. We engaged with 4,399 students, just missing 4,400. We had 595 volunteers encapsulating 2,335 hours of donated time. These events include employment fairs, career cruises, reality store, really our anchor program, career panels, and the tour of opportunity. Students learn job skills, entrepreneurship, career exploration, and financial literacy. This is what I call our feel-good arm of the Bloomington Chamber, and I just remind you that we are very community-minded here at the Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. I thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Going back to Zoom, Mr. Lucas, do we have another commenter?
Yes, next is YY On.
All right, YY On, you are next. You will have up to 4 minutes.
Hello, my name is YY, and I'm here to urge the council members that we really need to act multiplex housing unit by right. And I think the anemic number of approvals really speak for itself. And as you know, like many cities, Bloomington is suffering from housing cost crisis. And I think the primary driver is really the lack of supply, as the vacancy rate shows. And currently, the multiplex housing units are conditional, and the hurdles associated with the process is really significant, I think. I was at the Board of Zoning Appeals last time. It was really sad to see how difficult to get a single duplex approved. Like for instance, board member Nikki Perrell cited parking and affordability as the reason to deny a duplex. And it's kind of perfect catch-22 because to make it more affordable, you need to increase the number of units. But then she said, due to the parking concern around the neighborhood, she cannot approve it. So you cannot increase the unit and you cannot decrease the unit. And it's impossible to build anything in that condition. So actually, I think it's a kind of miracle that some application could get the approval right now. So, and with the growing negative impact of climate change and the urgent need to shift toward like public transportation and biking, and I think it is really shocking to hear board members' assumption that all residents of the new development will have cars, even multiple cars per household. And it is particularly shocking to hear that, given that the duplex location was like really close to the university in downtown. So I think based on what I see from the Board of Zoning Appeals, this like really small number of multiplexes make perfect sense. And I think we really need to allow building this multiplex housing unit by right across the whole city. And I think a really good example of this benefit of allowing multiplex housing units can be seen in Austin, Texas, I think. They recently implemented a by right policy for multiplex housing units citywide. And then they are experiencing a significant increase in the development of these housing types. And combined with more supply, they have been seeing like really substantial drop in housing prices. In other words, Austin solved the problem of the affordability of housing. So I think the increased availability of housing options made it easier for residents to find an affordable place to live and contributing to a more balanced and accessible housing market. And you know, some of the most beautiful and livable neighborhoods in the US, they allow all kinds of housing types, including multiplexes and townhouses. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to give public comment?
Comment from Sam Dove. Mr. Dove says to increase safety, connectivity, and accessibility along the Indiana Avenue corridor around downtown and the Indiana University campus, the City of Bloomington is considering protected bike infrastructure, pedestrian crossing improvements, and bus stop improvements. Join us on Tuesday, June 11th at 5:30 p.m. at the Sample Gates for a public meeting to express your thoughts on the corridor and how it can be improved. We also encourage you to fill out the survey about your experience along the corridor here. And rather than read out that URL, I will just point folks to the city page on this project, bloomington.in.gov/engineering/projects/Indiana. Or if you Google Indiana Avenue Safety Improvements, you should find that. There's a link to the survey and more information on that page. And I don't believe we have any additional comments.
All right, thank you very much. We will now move to appointments to boards and commissions. Do any of the appointment teams wish to bring forward a name? I believe we also have an issue of removing somebody who was given notice due to lack of attendance. Councilmember Flaherty.
First, I would like to move that we remove Alex Hakes from the Bloomington Commission on Sustainability.
All right. Mr. Flaherty, would you like to clarify the reason?
Sure. Yeah, at our previous regular session, we had initiated this process to give Alex Hakes the opportunity to respond with any extenuating circumstances to explain their absence. per Bloomington Code. We have not heard back, and so we are now moving on to formal removal.
All right, thank you. Any questions on this motion or comments? All right, all those in favor of removing Alex Hakes due to lack of attendance, say aye. 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 Any opposed? All right, thank you. He will be notified. Do we have any actual appointments to make tonight? Councilmember Zulik.
A motion to appoint Jack Baker to seat C2 of the Historic Preservation Commission and Travis Harding to seat C1 of the Tree Commission.
All right. Any questions or comments on those two recommended appointments? All right. All in favor of the two appointments just mentioned, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? All right. And we thank those two residents for their service. And we thank the clerk's office for helping us to notify those who serve and apply to our commissions. Next, we will move on to legislation for second readings and resolutions.
I move that Resolution 2024-11 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that Resolution 2024-11 be introduced and read. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Will the clerk please read by title and synopsis?
Resolution 2024-11 to amend the City of Bloomington's comprehensive plan in order to incorporate 1 new goal and 3 new policies related to accessible transportation and mobility principles. The synopsis is as follows. Pursuant to state law, this resolution amends the City of Bloomington's comprehensive plan in order to incorporate 1 new goal and 3 new policies related to accessible transportation and mobility principles.
I move that Resolution 2024-11 be adopted.
Second.
Thank you. And I believe we have Mr. Roebling from Planning and Transportation here to present this matter. Welcome.
Thank you. Ryan Roebling, Planning Services Manager from Planning and Transportation. I'll try to make this brief. Common Council initiated a proposal to amend the comprehensive plan through Resolution 2314, which went on to Plan Commission as case MP 1524. The resolution directed that the comprehensive plan amendment be prepared to reflect additional accessible transportation and mobility principles. The resolution called for the inclusion of a new policy consistent with 4 principles from the Accessible Transportation and Mobility Principles for the City of Bloomington, adopted in 2022. The amendment incorporates the principles outlined in the resolution, including 1 new goal and 3 new policies to Chapter 6 Transportation of the Comprehensive Plan. The goal and policies from the resolution were included as written to ensure alignment with the principles outlined in the ATM and to ensure coherence and consistency with the ATM and the comprehensive plan. The new goal, identified as Goal 6.8, Development of Equitable Access, includes the new policies, Policy 6.8.1, Involve People with Disabilities in Decision-Making, 6.8.2, Provide Safe and Functionable Mobility, and Policy 6.8.3, Ensure Accountability. And I can answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Roebling? Councilmember Daley.
So policy 6.8.1, involve people with disabilities in decision-making. Can you just illustrate for me a little bit more what that would look like, how they would be involved, and who exactly would be involved?
Sure, great question. So it can go a couple of different ways. First, I'll remind that everyone in the city that the comprehensive plan applies to all departments, both the administration and council. It's the plan for the entire city. But planning and transportation specifically, you'll see a proposal in a couple of months where we're going to combine 3 transportation commissions, we're going to propose to combine them, Parking Commission, Bicycle Pedestrian Safety Commission, and Transportation Commission into one commission that will advise on all transportation decisions, and it will propose to include a member from the CCA on that board so that we can ensure that someone is always there to answer any transportation-related changes to the city. So that's one of the ways we're going to do that. Another way planning and transportation is doing that is you just heard about the Indiana Avenue Safety Improvement Project. So one thing we're doing that we haven't done in the past, and that is something we've lacked, is asking demographic questions specifically related to if a person has a disability, so that we can ensure that their concerns are being addressed as well as anyone else who is a roadway user.
So just to clarify, so we are looking at all different types of disability that we're including in this, yes?
Correct, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions for Mr. Roebling? Seeing none, we'll go to the public. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on Resolution 2024-11? Please come to the podium and state your name and sign in, and you'll have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you. Deborah Meyerson, appreciate the chance to speak with you again. I'm here in my capacity as I chair the Transportation and Mobility Committee for the Council for Community Accessibility, and just wanted to say I'm thrilled to have this resolution before the council. It's something that the Council for Community Accessibility and this committee have been working on for the past couple of years, and it's just something that is really an important measure to really get the representation, such as the questions that were being discussed. I will just emphasize that even though it will be the council represents a diversity of people with disabilities, there are certainly many different needs because people with disabilities are, of course, not a monolith. So people with low vision, people with mobility challenges, people with intellectual developmental disabilities all have different transportation needs. And so, again, I certainly encourage consultation with the Council for Community Accessibility as a way to engage with many different populations and needs. So anyway, I'm just thrilled to have this before the council and appreciate your support for this amendment to the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council or public comments? Sorry.
Hello, Steve Volan. I was honored to be approached by Ms. Meyerson a couple of years ago to consider authoring a resolution encouraging the adoption of such principles into our comprehensive plan. I'm thrilled to see it happening now, but I just wanted to call attention to the fact that it wouldn't have happened without Ms. Meyerson's activism. And I think it's important that we encourage people to think about the comprehensive plan as a living document. I think some of you know how much work it was to develop a new comprehensive plan, how many years it took just to get to it, let alone the literal years it took to hammer out. So it's important that we as a community not rest on our laurels, that we amend the plan between major overhauls of the plan. So I'm very encouraged to see this change happening, and I had forgotten that it needed to be put into the comprehensive plan. I'm really glad to see it now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Lucas, is there anybody online who would like to give a comment on this matter?
Not that I see, no.
Anybody else in council chambers? All right, we'll come back to council members. Are there any comments before we move to a vote? Councilmember Flaherty?
Thank you to, first of all, the Council for Community Accessibility for developing and helping initiate this. I remember when Ms. Meyerson was here the first time presenting on them to the council, and I'm very appreciative of my former colleague, Mr. Volan, for taking that up and developing and helping pass the resolution last year to direct this change. I share some of the sentiments that he just did from the podium regarding updates to the comprehensive plan. Just like the Unified Development Ordinance, this should be living documents that are improved over time to reflect our goals and values as they evolve. I have two sort of tangential points, but they're both related to plan updates and accountability. And so I'll just mention them here, one of which is metrics tracking. It is related, I guess, to this, this ordinance. And the feeling that in our comprehensive plan reporting in past years, and I remember Mr. Roebling and I had this conversation a year or two ago, was that maybe the metrics we kind of adopted through the comprehensive plan aren't serving us particularly well, that there are quite a lot of them, and they're not informing decision-making necessarily. They're just sort of reporting on things that are happening, and that I voiced support then and am voicing it again now, that we might consider revising those metrics to be a narrower set of things that actually help us change the way we're making decisions. So just wanted to support that. And then also noting Mr. Alexander's comments earlier, I think I'm very interested in the context of the Safe Streets for All action plan that will be coming, in the possibility of continuing to build in that kind of accountability piece to our own values and plans in the way that Mr. Alexander did with the Traffic Commission in terms of reporting when we do experience serious injuries and deaths in our streets, and how to address those things. So all kind of related to follow through, and this ordinance, which I think is a terrific one, so thank you.
Councilmember Rollo?
I want to echo what my colleague just addressed and thank the committee and PNT and Ms. Myerson for their advocacy. I think it's very important to be cognizant of the variety of needs in the community. I also would like to follow up on Mr. Alexander's comments by noting that I think that we need to be attentive to opportunity costs of misplaced priorities in funding. There's only so much money to go around, and I think that we need to place it where it makes the most sense. That is, there may be places where it is nonsensical. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, I think we can go to a vote then on Resolution 2024-11. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes.
Ruff?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Strasburg?
Yes.
Asari?
Yes.
Rosenbarger?
Yes.
Daley?
Yes.
And Flaherty?
Yes.
Thank you.
That resolution is adopted, 9-0. Thank you very much.
I move that resolution 2024-12 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
It's been moved that Resolution 2024-12 be read by title and synopsis by the clerk. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Resolution 2024-12, resolution on budgeting excellence and strategic transformation. The synopsis is as follows. This resolution is sponsored by Councilmember Asari. It encourages the mayor and controller to commit to improving the city's budgeting process by working towards incorporating a budgeting framework more reflective of a budgeting for outcomes model. This approach should include strategic practices focused on community engagement, clear prioritization of goals, and evidence-based allocation of resources based on those goals. Instead of starting from last year's spending and adjusting allocations, the new model should start with what results the city government would like to prioritize.
I move that resolution 2024-12 be adopted.
Second.
All right. Councilmember Asari, would you like to present your resolution?
Absolutely, and I'll be brief because I have presented on this previously, but the general idea here is that while there are meaningful differences of opinion in our community about which policies result in the kind of society that we want, and they're often driven by different visions for our future, it's evident that many of the policies emerging from our democratic processes can at times fall short of their intended goals. It's akin to a car with a loosely connected steering wheel. And so we might argue over who's driving, but regardless of who holds the wheel, the destination will remain out of reach. And the longer that you stay in that car, harm is likely to result. And much of this failure is not intentional. I think that it stems from an outdated model that separates policy making from policy implementation, and each with distinct skills and incentives. So today we need to start thinking about, because there are a lot of emerging models of policy making and delivery, both theoretical and increasingly practiced, that are aimed at increasing or resulting in better fidelity to the intentions. In other words, reconnecting the steering wheel to the wheels of the car, if you will. Since all policy in our city flows from its budget, aligning the budget with intended outcomes should help us begin to bridge this gap between policymaking and implementation. So the resolution that's being considered could serve as a transformative step forward for our city through the proposed adoption of a budgeting for outcomes framework. This resolution reflects our collective dedication to not only enhance the efficiency and transparency of our city's budgeting process, but also to align our fiscal strategies directly with the priorities of our community. Traditionally, I think as was mentioned in the synopsis, our city has utilized a line item budget approach. And this method, while familiar, encourages incremental adjustments based on previous expenditures rather than strategic vision. Such a model is inherently inflationary, and at times it entrenches bureaucratic silos between departments. Perhaps more pertinent to our purposes is that it makes accountability and transparency on spending harder. We want to move toward a system where funds are genuinely delivering the outcomes our community expects and deserves. The adoption of an outcomes-based budget model proposes a shift from this tradition, focusing on results rather than merely inputs. This or similar approaches have been shown to be effective in cities across the nation, from small to large, fostering greater accountability and ensuring that taxpayer money is used more efficiently and effectively. The primary advantage, in my mind, of transitioning to this type of a budget model is the alignment of our resources with our most critical community priorities. It will allow us, I hope, to clearly define what success looks like for each funded initiative and measure progress against these goals. This process ensures that every dollar spent is an investment towards tangible, beneficial outcomes for our citizens. Moreover, this strategic approach may enhance transparency. By justifying budget allocations based on specific expected outcomes, we open a new channel of communication with our constituents, allowing them to see exactly how and why their tax dollars are being spent. It is crucial to recognize that this is not a panacea. I don't believe that any such thing exists. There's no silver bullets. And there are a lot of criticisms to this type of an approach. One of the primary criticisms is its reliance on quantifiable metrics, which can sometimes overshadow qualitative outcomes. It's also very difficult, as we've started to see, as we've sort of tried to start some of this process, to even come up with those priorities. But responding to some of these difficulties, I'd say that just our process of starting it, I think, will yield tremendous results for us as a city. But I think also it's worth noting, and this is encapsulated well, I think, in the resolution, that transitioning to this type of a method is going to involve significant upfront work and adaptation, and it's going to require changes in our mindsets, possibly training, and potentially financial investments in new systems, processes, technology, et cetera. So I anticipate the concern particular about the implementation timeline, the cost involved, training required for city staff. And so what we've done in this resolution is essentially given a sort of window for piloting this type of approach so that we can learn together and in that contextualize this type of approach that's been used by other cities to a context that works specifically for Bloomington. So with that, we have pilot projects, stakeholder engagement, training and support, all sort of considered within the resolution. The resolution outlines a structured path toward implementing outcome-based budgeting, and it calls for the formation of a task force to guide this process, increasing collaboration between the Controller's Office, the Mayor, and the Council to develop an implementation framework and the initiation of the pilots said earlier. So in conclusion, while acknowledging the limitations and challenges of moving to this type of a budgeting model, the potential benefits in terms of transparency, accountability, and alignment with community priorities argue strongly in favor of this approach. So this is about making smarter, more informed decisions that are directly tied to the aspiration and needs of our constituents. So I hope that you will all be happy to vote for it and pass it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Asare. Are there questions about the resolution? Councilmember Rallo.
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Asare, do you have ideas on how to develop consensus in terms of, well, let's say ways in which we can determine the public sentiment in terms of priorities?
Yeah, I think that's one of the core questions here, both about how we develop consensus amongst elected officials, amongst ourselves even. But we've been, I think the key point is that if we really were to move to a process like this, it's that we want to expand the budgeting window. That, I mean, if you look at other cities who do this, they often operate on 2-year cycles for producing their priorities and then the budget that sort of flows from that. And so I think the key element here is that we need to be very iterative with our discussions about priorities. Councilmember Rosenbarger has pointed out on a couple of occasions some interesting things that other cities like Boston is doing to get city stakeholder feedback from constituents on things. Like they say, okay, you have $100, how would you spend that $100, in each of the buckets that are available to you? More, I think, what the controller has already started to do, but more education on the sources of revenue, as we even saw in part tonight in presentations. But I think in short, the immediate thing that we need to start thinking about is, budgeting can't just be a thing we do, one meeting, over an hour and just say, here are our priorities, let's move on. But it's about involving this this should be what we're doing all the time, I think, as a council, as the fiscal body of the city.
Other questions? Councilmember Stossberg.
Thank you. I'm just kind of looking at this task force. I guess I have a few questions sort of related to the task force and related to that concept of like how to determine your outcomes and which things are important. And I think the question that I have or what I want to bring up is the idea of the comprehensive plan. Because in theory, you could say if you read through the comprehensive plan, like those should be our priorities and those should be attached to our outcomes. So did you consider, I guess, actually putting something into this resolution, and I'm sorry I didn't think of it last week or the week before, about specifically mentioning the comprehensive plan and potentially our other planning documents as priorities, as things that should be used by this task force to create the priorities, and is it worth putting something like that in specifically as a nod to those planning documents?
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I think that it highlights two things to me. First, yes, we have so many plans that we need to operationalize. I mean, and this gives us a sort of methodology to start to do that. The challenge here, though, is that with all of those plans, the question is, what are we going to prioritize, right? So, I mean, you take even just one of them. You take the Climate Action Plan as an example, 400x, recommendations. We have to decide, okay, what are we doing now? And so I think you're right. I think it might be a useful addition to this, saying that the task force should, building off of the existing strategies and plans that the city already has, make recommendations for moving forward with such a model. But I think, to me, I mean, really what your question highlights is actually one of the benefits of this type of an approach, because it directly ties all of those plans that we have to how we budget, which I would argue we haven't done in a fully integrated way in recent years.
Is it practical to figure out that kind of addition on the spot right now? I'm really sorry I didn't think of this before we had all.
It also may not be necessary. I mean, we could, when putting together the task force, we could, write a letter. We can task them. We can, I think there's lots of ways. Furthermore, we are all here present talking about this, so I think, accepting it in that way is perhaps sufficient. But yeah, I don't know what you think.
I can certainly attempt to get an amendment put together quickly, if there's a proposal.
Well, as a group, do we feel like it's necessary to amend it to make sure to mention those plans? For anybody who wants to answer.
I guess I'm raising my hand so I can call on myself. I don't think it's necessary. Certainly the the text of the resolution as it now reads does not exclude referring to those plans, and it seems to me that we should always be referring to those plans, no matter what task force or working group we create. So for me, it doesn't seem necessary to specifically refer to them. But I don't know what others think. Councilmember Zulik?
I would agree. I don't think we need an amendment. I think we can just keep it in mind, but I would also be in favor of, following the comprehensive plan.
Councilmember Strasburg, did you want to think about some language, or do you think that it's...
I think that it's really, really difficult to do that kind of thing on the spot. And I'm not sure that I want to try to belabor a meeting and make that happen. I just want to make sure that as we move toward budgeting for outcomes and just this idea of changing the culture of how we think about it, that we don't forget those planning documents that have, that considerable thought has been put into those planning documents, and that I think that you're right, Councilmember Asari, that there is no clear lines right now drawn in terms of budget between our comprehensive plan and the budget, or any of the other plans and the budget. But I think that those connections are there. And so budgeting for outcomes can certainly highlight those connections and make them very clear and transparent, and potentially expand more of them as we realize that there are places that are not aligned with those planning documents. And I just want to make sure that they don't get forgotten.
All right, any other questions for Councilmember Asari? If not, I have one. Have you talked with the mayor or the controller about this new budgeting paradigm?
Yes, and thank you for asking that. Even before introducing it to us all, I first reached out to Mayor and our controller to sort of gauge their interest in innovating around this space. I've had multiple productive conversations with them, and their input is reflected in the resolution as it stands.
So you're optimistic that if we were to call for such a task force, the mayor would be participating in creating it?
Indeed, and I think we changed when we first discussed the notion of this. We originally had called for a committee, which has certain that I think it originally had said that the council president would convene a committee, or the mayor, and anyways, that had connotations that we felt were maybe too strong, and so that's why we turned it into a task force to make it a little bit. I think quicker, faster to put together, et cetera. And the mayor was at said meeting with all of us when we discussed that.
Very good, thank you. If there are no other questions, we'll go to Councilmember Strasburg.
I have a round two. I am right now looking at the pie chart on page 26 of our packet. I'm going to show it to Councilmember Asari right now. And so in that pie chart, I don't know if Mr. Lucas can bring it up for the public, but it discusses Baltimore's kind of transition to this district, or to this model. And one of the things you can see is, that the big red in 2006, which is safer streets at 51%, and then that changed in allocations. But my question is, I feel like when I look at this pie chart, I go, okay, well, safer streets, a healthier city can, or the concept of safer streets can add to a healthier city, can add to a cleaner city, can add to stronger neighborhoods, which are all pieces of the pie chart that expanded once they did the staff preference stuff. And so the question is, how, in your research, how is overlap of categories handled in this model? And because, I feel like that's one of the challenges, is categorizing stuff and categorizing the outcome, and if you want the outcome. And so that just strikes me as super hard.
Yes.
And so can you just talk about that for a minute?
I mean, I don't think there's and this is part of what I was talking about the need to sort of contextualize this to us. I mean, this is the challenge with this type of an approach. I mean, figuring out what your buckets are, figuring out what your priorities are, that is hard. And I think, to me, though, we have to, going through that process in the first place, it's an iterative process, so we have to assume that sometimes we're going to get it wrong, but it gives us within it a ability to be like, hey, we messed up here. We didn't spend this correctly. Instead of, the alternative, which is just spread everything as thinly as possible, as sort of you see illustrated here. I don't necessarily think that, Baltimore is a great, corollary or example to us. I mean, it's but I mean, the point that you do see there is that when you ask everybody what are your preferences, well, you just get everything. Like, let's just fund everything, right? A little bit of everything. But as Councilmember Rallo pointed out, I mean, we have limited resources, and at some point we have to make those hard decisions about what are we funding this year and why. And again, you give yourself allowance to possibly make mistakes, but you can hold yourself accountable to say, this is what we thought we were achieving. Were we right? Were we wrong? And move on from there. So in short, I don't think there's a solid answer to the question you're asking. I think part of this is, that is part of the uncertainty that's built into this process, but that has some positive externalities. Just the process of having that discussion, just the process of asking that question in the first place will result in improved, I would think, outcomes of our budgeting process to begin with.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember Strasburg?
I just think that there is the potential for a lot of overlap, and I just want us to all be mindful of that and to try to have consistency. Yeah.
Well, and I'll say one other point on this is that, so think about, let's say we were to say that one of our goals is a more efficient, transparent government. Okay, we want to deliver better government services. Well, that one way we might do that is investing in civic technology. Okay, that's going to have overlap with lots of other things that we might want to do in the city, and so and that's okay. That's a good thing, because now you start having departments working together on, hey, we're going to invest in this side, and they're going to work together on accomplishing this goal, this goal, this goal, this goal. That's what I'm talking about, how the process of going through this actually can yield lots of benefits that are external to the just direct question of, are we good at coming up with priorities? Like, the process of discovering that is in and of itself a worthy pursuit, I would argue.
I have a follow-up question. So it was mentioned, that we want more citizen engagement, more resident engagement in establishing our priorities. Do you have some examples of, in your research, of how best to engage residents in the process? What actual practices can lead to higher resident participation?
That is a big question. But I'll say one thing. This is a conversation we should continue having. But one recent finding is that, and actually I think this is reflected in what our mayor's been doing with traveling town halls, is that a lot of our public engagement is built around the ideas that we think the public would like to hear. Okay? And often, the things that they're concerned about, the things that they have questions about, are actually different than the things we communicate. I was recently at a conference where a big portion of it was about this, like, how do you align citizen expectations with sort of your messaging and projects and so on and so forth. And so one way is going and actually, doing the engagement where people are. I think we're starting to do that a bit. I think we've talked about things that we do well already, like charrettes and those type of activities. But this is a much broader, I think, conversation that, again, introducing this type of a methodology into the core of what we do, which is our budget, again, gives us the opportunity to think about, oh, hey, have we engaged meaningfully with the public on these questions before moving forward?
So do you envision that question of how to engage the public as something that the task force would tackle?
Yes, that needs to be a core question.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other questions before we go to the public? All right. If there's any member of the public who would like to comment on Resolution 2024-12, please come up to the microphone and state your name and sign in, and you'll have up to 3 minutes. Mr. Lucas, if you want to remind people on Zoom how they can give comment, please.
Yes, if there are folks on Zoom that would like to speak, please let us know by raising your hand or sending a chat to the host. You can find the raise hand button in your control bar by clicking on the Reactions tab or the More tab.
All right, I don't see anybody here in council chambers. Is there anybody raising their hand on Zoom?
Not that I see.
No takers. Okay. Well, then we will come back to the council members for final comments on Resolution 2024-12. Any council members care to comment? Well, I will, if nobody else will. I appreciate Councilmember Asari bringing this forward. I think this is a better way to think about our budget, and I think it'll require a lot of work and a lot of retraining of our minds, as some of us who have been around for a while have gotten used to doing things a different way, but I think it can really improve the way that we use public funds and to the benefit of our community. And to reflect what is most important to the people who are paying our salaries. So I think it's a good thing. Any other comments? All right. Clerk Bolden, if you could please call the roll on Resolution 2024-12.
Councilmember Rallo?
Yes.
Ruff?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Strasburg?
Yes.
Asari?
Yes.
Rosenbarger?
Yes.
Daley?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes?
Zulik?
Yes.
All right, that is adopted by a vote of 9-0. Then we will move on to the next item.
I move that ordinance 2024-13 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Will Clerk Bolden please read?
Ordinance 2024-13 to amend Title II of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Administration and Personnel regarding amending Bloomington Municipal Code 2.04.380, Order of Business at Regular Sessions. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance amends Bloomington Municipal Code 2.04.380 entitled Order of Business at Regular Sessions, which sets forth the order of items on the council's regular session agenda. It reduces the standard speaker time limit applicable to reports from the public and additional reports from the public from 5 minutes to 3 minutes and removes a provision allowing the presiding officer to reduce this time allotment based on the number of people wishing to speak.
I move that ordinance 2024-13 be adopted.
Thank you. I'm going to turn the gavel over to Councilmember Strasburg because I'm the sponsor of this legislation, and our Vice President has stepped out of the room.
Well, wonderful. I'm on the spot now. Councilmember Piedmont Smith, would you like to present?
Sure.
Thank you.
So this ordinance came about following a work session that was held in April regarding public comment at council meetings. We exchanged a lot of ideas at the work session regarding public comment. And one thing that we agreed on was that it was confusing to people during the open public comment periods to know how much time they were going to have. Because according to our current code, the whole period can only last 20 minutes for the part at the beginning of the meeting and 25 minutes at the end. And that 20-minute period at the beginning is divvied up then among the speakers, with everybody getting 5 minutes, but if there's more than 4 speakers, then it'll be less. And so the chair of the meeting kind of has to do this math in their head, and they have to kind of count on people raising their hands at the beginning to say they want to speak, which often does not encapsulate everybody who wants to speak. Sometimes people decide they want to speak halfway through that period. And so if somebody is coming and is prepared to give comment, they really don't know how much time they're going to have for that comment. And so that is difficult for the public. Let me see, I got to go back to my memo. The time limit that we have traditionally given for people to speak on items that are on the agenda, which is not in code, but this is just kind of common practice, has been 3 minutes. So it made sense then to, in the spirit of predictability, to say 3 minutes as well for the comment on items that are not on the agenda. And as I said in the memo, I know that 20 is not divisible by 3 in an even way, but a lot of speakers don't take the full time, and time is sometimes lost between speakers, so it's an inexact science anyway. So I think that, oh yes, so if we adopt this change, we also need to make some changes to the document called Rules for Making Public Comment on Agenda and Non-Agenda Items, which we can talk about if this ordinance is approved. So that's the gist of it. If anybody has any questions, I'm open to that, and then we do also have an amendment.
Does anybody have any questions? Councilmember Rallo?
Yes, I'm generally in favor of this, but I wonder about exceptions. So, Mr. Lucas, if there was a special presentation by the public in which they could consolidate their comments, or, you know, could we suspend the rules in order to amend this?
I believe so. Just pulling up the code section. If you give me a moment. Our local code provides that the council can amend the normal order of business by a majority vote, including the time limits. So either ahead of a period of public comment, at the beginning of a meeting, the council can by majority vote both amend the order of business as well as the time limits provided.
So just by majority vote?
Yes.
Okay, very good, thanks.
Are there any other questions by council members? Okay, seeing none, should we do the amendment now? Great, then that amendment is mine, so I'm going to pass this over to Councilmember Ruff. We're just playing pass the gavel here tonight. So I'm going to move that Amendment 1 to Ordinance 2024-13 be adopted.
Second.
So one of the things that happened in the last meeting was that it went late, and it kind of got brought to my attention brought to my realization that there's the potential with first readings happening after second readings, that if for some reason second readings went very long, past midnight, then we might never get to first readings. And that was a concern that was on my mind. And so to that end, Amendment 1 changes our normal order of business to put first readings before second readings. So then there's not a chance of an unfortunate delay in any ordinance that might need a first reading. And that is the only thing that it does. So if anybody has any questions or concerns, please let me know.
Any council members have any questions for Councilmember Strasburg on this amendment? Seeing none. Oh, seeing none. I would probably like to ask, actually, if at this point, if it's the appropriate time, does staff have anything to add or say about this?
No, I think this change makes sense given our local restriction on debating or amending any legislation at first readings. Robert's Rules of Order generally suggests that old business be taken care of before new business. However, our local code prevents the council from debating or discussing legislation for first reading, so I don't have any concerns with moving that agenda item up before second readings.
Okay, thank you. I guess we should go to the public and see if there's anyone from the public who would have a comment on this amendment.
There is an issue, though, with the possibility that at first reading, and it is within the council's power to unanimously hear something the same night. I mean, I think it's a unanimous vote that the council can decide to hear a first reading the same night that it's mentioned. So the amendment might have the possibility. It'd be rare. I can't think of a time in the past 20 years, more than once or twice, where we did it. But you would run the risk of the possibility that a first reading might actually get heard that night. The council could, of course, also then move to postpone it to the end of the meeting. But that might sort of defeat the I mean, if you're voting unanimously to hear something in first reading that night, it must be exigent. There must be some big deal happening. So while I agree with Mr. Lucas that it's probably not a big deal, that you should think about that part. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Volan. Do we have any final comments from council members on the amendment? Oh, Councilmember Strasburg.
I want to address that because we did actually talk about that, Mr. Lucas and I did, and thought that that could still work by putting that second, I'm not going to say this very well, it's not going to, I'm hoping it makes sense, putting that second reading of that item on the agenda during second readings. So, because otherwise you would do second readings and then first readings and then go back and do a second reading on that agenda item. Whereas if the first readings went first, then you could do first readings and then just do second readings. And so we did actually think about that as a case that could come up, and decided that that would not be any more problematic than it might currently be in terms of an order of agenda.
Any other comments to be added by council members? Seeing none, we're ready to take a vote on the amendment. Will clerk please call the roll on the amendment?
Absolutely. Councilmember Ruff.
Yes.
Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Strasburg.
Yes.
Asari.
Yes.
Rosenbarger.
Yes.
Daly.
Yes.
Flaherty.
Yes.
Zulik.
Yes.
And Rallo.
Yes.
That passes unanimously. Now we're ready to move back to consideration of the orders as amended. As amended. Now, sorry, I stepped out of the room for just a second. Where were we at exactly?
Comment.
At public comment. So, would anyone from the public like to comment on the ordinance as amended?
We do have
Anybody online?
We do have a taker on Zoom, and if there are other folks that would like to speak, please let us know by raising your hand or sending a chat to the host. First up, we have Jeff Richardson.
Thank you. My points relate to how to consider the 3-minute rule as it applies to the overall intention of enhancing and encouraging public participation in city government. And it follows very nicely on the former discussion about the former ordinance. It's all about enhancing communication. So my points here are more narrow. I totally support finding ways to enhance public participation. The first one is to consider the possibility of having meetings on major issues that would allow more in-depth discussion before the general public comment session. For example, during the 9-hour council meeting where the tents in the parks item was on the agenda, I think that, as I recall, the experts had 3 minutes to speak, just as did the general public. And in hindsight, upon reflection, I think the council might have considered having these recognized experts speak before the general public got their 3 minutes and have a fuller discussion about the facts, laying down the foundation, not unlike congressional panels, if you will. I think this would likely enhance the kind of discussions that everyone's looking for and would inform the public at the same time. The second quick point is at the discretion of the chair, I would allow in certain contexts the rebuttal of comments that were challenged by a subsequent speaker. For example, when the police union folks were sharing their concerns about moving into the showers building, arguing, for example, or sharing some statistics, the former mayor questioned some of those stats afterwards, and he had absolutely the right to do so. But under the current rules, and incidentally, those 2 police union members only had 3 minutes to speak, even though they were dramatically impacted by this decision. Under the current rules, there was not a chance for them to rebut or to clarify. So in this kind of situation, the council president, I think, should have the discretion to decide if the police, in this case, police union, could respond, since they were, again, most impacted by this situation. Both of these suggestions allow the president to use her judgment to enhance public dialogue and ensure fairness. And so it's all about making sure that we have the most full discussion possible, people feeling heard, and also giving the council president, with the blessing of the council, the chance to use her judgment and her discretion. It would be unfortunate if these new rules or new guidelines were perceived as putting handcuffs on the council or the council leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else from the public like to speak?
Steve Woolen. There's a couple of problems here, but they're related. In theory, you can have 7 or 8 people speak at 3 minutes a pop with a 20-minute period. If the council isn't thinking about having people sign in before the meeting so that you can predict how many people will speak, then you're going to have a problem if 10 or 15 people want to speak, and then who gets to decide? Whoever gets in line first come, first serve, isn't necessarily a way to encourage the kind of holistic discussion that former Councilmember Richardson is advocating for, which I agree with. You know, like, I understand the logic of at least giving people predictability, how much time they're going to have when they come to speak. However, the council has it's already reaching a breaking point that it can see this year because of the events of 2021 that led me to write the reasonable hour ordinance that people are already using to stop meetings at midnight. How many issues does the entire council want to hear in regular session? How long do they want to devote to any given item? One of the solutions that night in March 2021 might have been to split up the public discussion across multiple meetings. In fact, that was a more humane way of handling it than forcing it all to be had that night. But in order to have the full and free discussion that Councilmember Richardson and many other people, including me, believe should be had on a given issue, I feel like there's too many people anymore who want to speak. This chamber can fill up at 150 people. When we were online only, as many as 250 to 300 people would attend a meeting. You have to find a way to split up the time among multiple meetings. And maybe not every member of the council has to hear every piece of public comment. Yes, I'm going to say the magic word again. If there was a committee that it could be referred to, that committee could hold multiple meetings until all the public comment was made. Otherwise, you're going to get what happened in 2021 after the homelessness ordinance, when we took up the issue of plexes. It was a big issue. It was controversial, and the council didn't really know what to do about it. You wound up having 6 meetings across 2 weeks of the full council to discuss the many amendments regarding it. That should have been broken up over time. It should have been taken up by a committee. Committees are a civil way to have the kind of discussion that I think everyone says they want to have. It's time, I think, that the council started forming them. Thank you.
Comments? Would anyone else from the public like to make a comment? Mr. Lucas, do we have anybody else online?
Not that I see.
Back to council for any final, another opportunity for questions if they have any for the sponsor, or any final comments. Councilmember Rallo?
Well, I'm supportive, and I think this gives good structure. I don't think it's something that is that can't be suspended at times if need be. Regarding Mr. Richardson's suggestion on specific topics of the council, I think that we do take efforts to structure debate, and I think that it's good advice in terms of people who have particular expertise who could give certain insight to a topic. Might be allotted more time, something to keep in mind. Thanks.
I would just like to note that, maybe for the public's benefit, and also echoing what former council member Richardson mentioned, that this overlaps with our conversations around other forms of meetings, of incorporating consensus building activities, as an example, into our deliberation strategies, and so on and so forth. I really think that it is good to not think of public comment at meetings as the only way that people can contribute to the discussion on a topic. I also would like to echo what Councilmember Rallo said. We always have to be willing, when necessary, to adjust our rules if we see it fit. And I think that we've given ourselves that flexibility. And then the last point, just again echoing, or rather pulling on the thread that former Councilmember Richardson brought up, is, I thought, a really interesting thought around rebuttal, if you will, if someone is mentioned, or if there's continued back and forth conversation, to maybe give provision. And we maybe could think of this at another time, but giving a provision for a 1-minute response or something like that at the chair's discretion. But I do think that was a good idea that we shouldn't gloss over. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilmember Zulik?
I second a lot of what's already been said, and I guess I would just like to add, I think we need to get a lot more creative in how this council as a body interacts with the public, especially in terms of inspiring more conversation, instead of we're talking at the public talks at us, we talk back, and then we vote. I'm not saying that we need to have a conversation in these meetings in particular, but I'm more suggesting that we explore other avenues in which we can have those conversations. So, thank you. And thank you to former council members Volin and Richardson for providing their insight. Really appreciated.
Councilmember Daley, did you have?
Yes, actually, first I'd like to support what Councilmember Zulik just said. I do think, better ways of communicating back and forth would be amazing. But I also just want to say I think this ordinance is maybe a kindness too to some of the members who want to speak during public comments, because as somebody who likes to prepare very well ahead of time before I'm going to speak in public, and who has been known to practice to meet certain time limits, to show up somewhere and find out I've got to shave a minute off my prepared and practiced words is enough to make me sit down and say, well, then I'm just not going to speak at all. So I think that's, like I said, a kindness, and it's also just a way to keep it fair across all topics too for public comment, and from week to week as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Other council members like to make a comment? Okay, we'll move to Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yeah, as the current council president, I do have some concerns about leaving things to the chair's discretion. I would rather have rules that guide what the presiding officer should and shouldn't do, so that can be a topic for future discussion. Also, as chair of the Special Committee on Council Processes, I can tell you that we are coming forward with a proposal soon to have different types of council meetings where there can be more free discussion and back and forth with members of the public. And in this context, I urge my colleagues who are on that committee to get back with me on the proposal that I sent out. Thank you.
Any other comments from council members? Councilmember Strasburg.
Thank you. I also want to echo what several of my colleagues have said, and I want to make a couple of notes in addition. One is that constituent meetings are wonderful times to have back and forth conversation with council members about any kinds of topics that people want to bring forth. I announced mine tonight. I know that Councilmember Rollo regularly has one, Councilmember Ruff, Councilmember Piedmont Smith, Councilmember Asari has had them. I think that we've all pretty much had them. So I would encourage anybody who wants to have conversations with us to remember that those exist and look them up. Secondly, I also want to just note, as Mr. Volan brought up several other potential roadblocks and challenges with public comment, and kind of tagging on to what Councilmember Piedmont Smith just said about some things maybe coming forth through the Special Committee on Council Processes. I mean, I think it's pretty evident that there are more possibilities for things that we can do to improve public comment in any number of ways. And there were other things at that meeting that we had, I can't even remember when anymore, a couple months ago, other ideas that came out of that, other possibilities that I think are still percolating around council. So just for the public's benefit, this is not like the only thing that might come I think, with regard to considering how we do business and how we engage with the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments from council members, are we ready to call the question?
Ready? Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Strasburg?
Yes.
Asari?
Yes.
Rosenbarger?
Yes.
Daley?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Zulik?
Yes.
Rollo?
Yes.
Ruff?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Clerk. The item passes unanimously.
Given that that just passed, I would like to move that the council adopt the new rules for making public comment on agenda and non-agenda items.
These are in your packet. This is a document that was adopted several years ago after the Council Rules Committee kind of studied how we could improve how our meetings are run. And since we have just made some changes, those are reflected in the new version that I would ask us to vote on this evening. In addition, the State General Assembly recently passed legislation that outlined what a legislative body can do in case of disruptive people who are speaking at the meeting. And so that was incorporated by Council Attorney Lucas into this document as well. So I'm open to any questions or comments about this, adopting the new document. I don't see any. All right. Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on the changes to the rules for making public comment on agenda and non-agenda items? Anybody on Zoom?
Not that I see.
Okay. Well, I would move to a voice vote then. All in favor of adopting the changes to the rules for making public comment, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. We will make those changes and put that new document online and make it available to anybody attending our meetings. Next, we will move to legislation for first reading.
I move that ordinance 2024-14 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Will the clerk please read by title and synopsis?
Ordinance 2024-14 to amend Title II of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Animals regarding amending Chapter 7.16 Commercial Animal Establishment Permits, Chapter 7.54 Fees, and Chapter 7.56 Enforcement Procedure. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance is sponsored by Council Members Piedmont Smith and Rollo. It comes in the wake of action by the Indiana General Assembly, which has preempted local units from prohibiting the sale of dogs by retail pet shops through passage of House Enrolled Act 1412, which will go into effect July 1st, 2024. This ordinance reinstitutes the requirements present in the Bloomington Municipal Code before passage of Ordinance 2145, with which pet shops must comply in order to sell dogs. This ordinance updates those requirements in conformity with the newly enacted state code. It also clarifies the continued prohibition on the sale of cats and the requirements for the display of shelter or rescue animals by host pet shops, institutes a new permit fee for pet shops that wish to sell dogs, and clarifies the penalties for violations of Title VII, including instituting a uniform penalty for violations in which the permit is free or costs $0.
Thank you. And we will discuss this item at our next regular session, which is next Wednesday evening, the June 12th. Now we move to our second period of public comment on items not on the agenda. Is there anybody who would like to give a comment? Mr. Lucas, is there anybody on Zoom?
Not that I see.
All right, we'll move on to matters of the council schedule. We have a budget advance meeting with the mayor scheduled for next Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. 6 p.m., not 6:30. Currently scheduled in council chambers. Mr. Lucas brought to my attention that this is perhaps not the best venue for a roundtable discussion, so he has checked to see if the Allison Conference Room is available, and it is. So if there's no objection, I'd like to change the location of that budget advance meeting to the Allison Conference Room. If there's no objection, we can just do it, I think. Any other matters of council schedule, Mr. Lucas?
I do want to note that the PS Lit Committee is looking to meet likely next week, Thursday at noon. We're still working to confirm that date, but there should be a notice of that meeting going out shortly. So for the members of the council on that committee, be on the lookout for that meeting notice and materials related to the work of that group. I think that's it.
Thank you. And thank you, Council Attorney Lucas, for spearheading the PS Lit meeting and it's the accompanying materials. PS Lit means Public Safety Local Income Tax. So that is a committee comprised of county, City of Bloomington, Ellisville, and Steinsville representatives, probably meeting on June 13th. All right. I think we're done this evening, so thank you very much. We are adjourned.